Decisive action is needed now more than ever. Today, as we stand before the biggest threat our civilization has faced, climate change, we have the opportunity to rewrite history and forge a new way forward as we follow the path towards achieving the SDG goals. Our presence here declares our commitment, a collective pledge to chart a shared roadmap that turns aspirations into realities. The upcoming journey rests on the belief in our collective force. Aligned with the planet's pulse, we channel our passion into forging alliances with the potential to transform people's lives, embracing the certainty that impact unfurls when knowledge takes the form of action. We highly value the unique perspectives gained from the past Finance in Common summits, which we now welcome in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have evolved into a formidable movement, boasting more than 520 public development banks and over 450 financial institutions. Together, we strengthen our shared vision to empower people with accessible and inclusive tools to be the driving forces of change. Welcome to the 4th Finance in Common Summit, where we stand united to breathe life into a global coalition with shared purposes, to mobilize private capital toward achieving sustainable development goals, to strive to mainstream social impact, to ensure that human rights and climate-positive actions are at the heart of our transformative strategies and programs, to keep paving the way for a future where transformation becomes our legacy.
Muy buenos días, damas y caballeros.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to the 4th World Summit of Public Development Banks, Common Finance, FIX 2023. Colombia is receiving you, the country that is Caribbean, Andes, and Amazon, a country with 2 oceans, one of the nations with a greater diversity in the world, the country that our noble Gabriel Garcia Marquez raised to the universal category of magic realism, a country full of history and past, but also a contemporary and democratic republic with a modernity that is more fair for 50 million inhabitants. And Cartagena is receiving you, the great Cartagena de Indias, the heroic city, the walled city, the city that was also in charge of forging the Colombian independence. You are illustrious host of Colombia and of Cartagena that is welcoming you. Welcome to this, our home. To the representative of more than 520 public development banks, the governments of the different nations, international organizations, the private sector, the academia, and the civil society, coming from more than 120 countries, it is an honor to have you, all of you here in this meeting so as to build new alliances for the next generation of development finance. As of now, we are starting a 3-day journey. We will have 6 plenary sessions, 5 discussion panels, 15 roundtables, 8 parallel meetings, and more than 20 special activities to share knowledge, to explore innovation in financing, and to have agreements to face the most difficult social problems throughout mutual collaboration. We want to welcome all those that have joined our broadcast in this opening session, and we want to encourage you to please actively participate using the hashtag Financing Common 2023 and interact with the valuable content that we will be sharing in our accounts of Twitter, Financing Common. Please join and be part of this transforming experience. Without any further ado, I want to invite Michael Stadt, editor for Latin America of the Financial Times, and the members of his panel, Werner Hoyer, President of the European Investment Bank, Rainer Wood, General Director of the AFD Group, and President of IX, Irenhoven, the President of the IDB, Poitumelo Funako, President of the Development Bank of South Africa. Please come up to the stage. Thank you very much.
A continuación se dirige a usted.
We will have now Javier Díaz Fajardo, President of Bancoldes, a co-host of this meeting in Colombia.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Señoras y señores, de todos nosotros en Bancoldes, el Banco de Desarrollo de Colombia, le damos la bienvenida a la cumbre Financing Common 2023. Yo soy Javier Díaz Fajardo y me siento muy honrado de dirigirme a ustedes en el día de hoy.
Excited to host you in Cartagena, Colombia, at the heart of Latin America and the Caribbean. I want to thank all of you who traveled to be here in person. And I also want to thank the incredible organization team that has worked enthusiastically for months to make this summit happen. This fourth edition of Finance in Common is made possible by the generosity of ALIDE, the Inter-American Development Bank, CAF, and the European Investment Bank. We are also deeply grateful with IACID, AFD Group, the Caribbean Development Bank, CDP of Italy, the International Development Finance Club, IFAD, and the World Federation of Development Financing Institutions. Personally, I want to commend Mr. Remy Riou for laying out the vision that has made the Finance in Common Summits possible, and Mr. Adama Marico for materializing this vision. 3 decades into the 21st century, humanity has been positively transformed by science, medicine, education, technology, and all forms of connectivity, to name just a few fields. However, we have reasons to be deeply concerned regarding the way in which the benefits from these advances have been reaped unequally among populations and geographies. Just as many of us traveled comfortably to meet and discuss these matters, tens of thousands of migrants also travel each year to a place not too far away, but to embark on a very different journey. Right now, dozens of families from different nationalities are attempting to cross by foot the 100-kilometer Darien Gap, a thick rainforest ecosystem that connects the south and the north of this continent. Why do they risk everything in a treacherous passage riddled with perils that leaves casualties and even fatalities? Because living conditions in their countries of origin, far from improving, have worsened. And what will we do, all of us, to remediate this dire state of affairs? We will accelerate the pace at which the Sustainable Development Goals are met, Since halfway to the 2030 deadline, progress is meager. Only 15% of SDGs are on the path to successful completion. Record temperatures, fires, floods, the COVID-19 pandemic, and armed conflicts remind us that year after year, too much human suffering abounds. This region, that some of you visit for the first time, is no exception. Even the beautiful bay in which this city is harbored is heavily polluted and threatened by rapidly rising sea levels. We face new challenges as we continue to struggle with decades-old problems. Reducing poverty faster and more decisively, with a blend of conventional and innovative policies, is essential to tackle inequality and bridge social gaps. For this to happen, governments must step up international cooperation, since many of our social and environmental problems stem from illegal transnational activities. Fortunately, to address these challenges, we now have knowledge and capabilities that were unimaginable at the beginning of this century. We can process big data at unprecedented levels and speed to better serve communities. We have global positioning systems that aid conservation efforts. And we are starting to harness the power of artificial intelligence for education and climate-related action. On a global scale, we have witnessed a surge in the deployment of resources towards sustainability. And in this regard, 2022 marked a double milestone. For the first time in history, investments in energy transition surpassed $1 trillion. And at this level, equaled global investment in fossil fuels. This is a remarkable achievement in the effort to balance the traditional way of providing energy, which we will still need for some time, and the future, which will run on clean sources. In Latin America, we have turned from potential to action. We are no longer just rich in unexploited natural resources. We are set to become leaders in solar and wind generation, with over 300 gigawatts of energy readily available by 2030. We have embraced ambitious projects such as the Neoenergia 600 megawatt wind and solar complex in Brazil, which will supply clean energy to more than 1 million households, with technical and financial support from European and Japanese agencies. Our region has also been endowed with the greatest green sanctuary on Earth, the Amazon Basin. Spanning 8 countries, 7 million square kilometers, and 35% of South America, the Amazon is home to 30% of the planet's biodiversity. But between 2001 and 2020, the Amazon lost more than 54 million hectares, or almost 9% of its forest, to illegal extraction of natural resources, climate change, unsustainable logging, agricultural, and cattle ranch activities, and poorly planned infrastructure. Despite these seemingly unsurmountable odds, we are reacting firmly and quickly. Less than a month ago, the development banks from the Amazon basin countries met in Brazil to launch the Green Coalition, a groundbreaking initiative aimed at protecting the Amazon while respecting local knowledge and culture. This Green Coalition, spearheaded by the Inter-American Development Bank and BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank, has set the stage for large-scale conservation efforts going forward, and the World Bank has strengthened this coalition by supporting net zero deforestation efforts. Here in Colombia, we continue to work on the preservation of our natural parks and heritage. The Chiribiquete National Park represents the largest protected area in the country. 40,000 square kilometers, a unique range of tabletop mountains, and over 75,000 figures painted by indigenous peoples dating back 10 to 20,000 years. These paintings, depicting everyday life, human struggles, and sacred rites, remind us that time is immutable and we must act swiftly. So what makes this summit different from other fora in which we set out to accomplish similar goals? Simply stated, the fact that in this room, we have representatives from public and multilateral development banks whose combined balance sheets surpass $20 trillion. This figure becomes even more relevant if we consider that mobilization of resources from these institutions, which currently stands at $2 trillion per year, has room to grow and leverage additional investment. Channeling resources for SDG fulfillment is one of the 5 key areas of urgent action that the Secretary General of the United Nations has called for, along with the recommitment to transformative SDG action, advancement of inclusive policies for equality, deepening capacities for SDG progress, and strengthening the UN system for SDG alignment. In the Secretary General's own words, we need a massive surge in finance. The good news is we have plenty to build on. Global investor demand for green bonds exceeds $500 billion per year, and bonds for the sustainable use of marine ecosystems are following suit as issuers tap the blue market. In May 2023, the government of Indonesia issued a blue bond in the Japanese capital market, marking the world's first publicly offered sovereign blue bond in line with International Capital Market Association principles. And last year, the World Bank issued the Wildlife Conservation Bond, an outcome-based financial instrument that aims to support 150,000 hectares in South Africa, including the measurable protection of a critically endangered species. The innovation of this bond is outstanding. Financing provided for conservation efforts comes from payments made to South African parks by the World Bank instead of coupons paid to investors, and at the end of the bond's term, a results-based grant from the Global Environment Facility supports a success payment. Private and non-for-profit sectors have also advanced transactions which prove that financial markets stand ready to aid conservation efforts. In 2019, the Conservation Fund issued green bonds to purchase and hold forestry that would otherwise be developed, adding to the hundreds of thousands of hectares the United States loses every year to real estate. In this transaction, a global investment bank played a critical role in securing investors, evidencing that all types of banks, not just public and multilateral, are crucial in the fight against climate change and the protection of biodiversity. Over the next 3 days, we will address issues related to financial inclusion, sustainable infrastructure, climate change, and the role of public development banks. As our discussions move forward, please keep in mind the renewed sense of urgency. Achieving the SDGs by 2030 is imperative. We cannot afford to stall when so much is at stake. On the contrary, we must dare to imagine new solutions that go beyond conventional thinking. We need to challenge established norms and come up with specific ideas. As agents of change, we have the capacity and the responsibility to make a more just and sustainable future a reality. In this regard, I would like to leave you with 3 additional thoughts. The Green Coalition for the Amazon should be strengthened by a multi-billion dedicated fund in the form of a public-private partnership. The Amazon deserves no less. Carbon markets should become just as important as securities markets, with transparent price formation and disclosure. We need to start working immediately on bond issuances that lower the cost of capital for poorer borrowers based on the guarantee of those with better credit standings. The distinction between those who are investment grade and those who are not is odious. Thank you all for making Finance in Common the forum for better financial ideas.
Muchas gracias, Javier, por esta.
Thank you very much, Javier, for this welcome. Now we are going to start with our agenda with 2 panels that will be led by Michael Statt for Latin America Financial Times.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And we're going now to the first panel. I have 4 splendid panelists here with me today to talk about some of the topics that are central to the summit. I think from Javier's remarks, we have a call to action. The organisers said they wanted an action-oriented summit, so we're going to focus on action. There was some urgency in what Javier had to say. Only 15% of those Sustainable Development Goals are on track, and we're only 7 years away from 2030. But it's not all doom and gloom. We have with us, under the Financing Common umbrella, a very powerful instrument for helping to achieve those goals, the public development banks, which between them lend 2.7 trillion a year, 12% of global investment. And this initiative, of course, is all about joining up the force and the power of those banks, sharing best practice, leveraging their ability to crowd in private sector financing and making them more effective. So with that in mind, that idea of how we get most bang for our buck, I'd like to turn to our first panelist, Ilan Goldfein, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, who joins us here from Washington. Ilan, thank you very much for coming. You have very wide experience, having worked in the public and the private sector in Brazil and internationally. Perhaps you could tell us your thoughts on how development banks can work together under the Financing Common umbrella to mobilize private capital to help improve the progress towards those all-important Sustainable Development Goals.
Michael, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see this place full of colleagues and partners. I would like to start just thanking Bancoldex President Diaz for his initial remarks, the Colombian government for hosting us, this wonderful panel with you, Michael Hoyer, with Remy, with Boitumelo here with us. Thank you for being with us, not from here. So we are very glad to have. We have more than 50 public development banks from Latin America, but the idea is that we have not only from Latin America and the Caribbean. We at IDB remains one of the primary allies, and as you mentioned, Michael, we have goals, Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. We are in the midway, but we are not there yet. And actually, we are in the half point, but not yet even in the half of the way. So there's a lot of things to do. And we are now at the helm trying to get things done. As you mentioned, the call is for action, more of walking the talk, than just talking the walk, if you want. And there is numbers. People say about $2.5 trillion annually of gap. To be honest, I don't know exactly the number. What I do know is that the needs are in the trillions. And what we have here now from our banks are in the billions. So we need to move from billions to trillions, and the way to do it is to partner. And here FIX is quite relevant because we are partnering with very important allies, the public development banks. They have a very special role. They fill the gaps. They're not going to substitute the private sector. They're going to fill the gaps where the private sector will not and cannot enter. Sometimes they will mitigate the risks with us, but for the private sector to be able to, not the risk, but re-risk, reabsorb the risk. Sometimes they will anchor their positions, the projects, and then private capital will come. And sometimes they will be our hand in terms of the capillarity. We, the multilateral development banks, don't have the capillarity to reach. They can reach the commercial banks through the development banks, and that's where we can partner so that we can reach the small and medium enterprises, we can reach the people. That is very important to reach the goals. In addition, we need to work together to innovate, to build capacity in the development banks, but also in general. In terms of innovation, we need to think about how we're going to mobilize the private sector and others to come together for this need of trillions. And here we need to think about re-risking, but also innovative financial instruments. And we at the IDB think that there is a role for us to lead, because we have been doing it for quite some time, on using the right instruments at the right time in a scale that can make the difference. There are the normal instruments, like guarantees, where you provide guarantees, and these guarantees are the way to give incentives. There are the roles of blended finance, which means use concessional money with the normal resources to have a lower cost, and that gives incentives for climate, for infrastructure, for social. But there are new instruments that are coming around. One of them is provide incentives, instruments that provide incentives at the right moment. If you reach your goals, if you reach an indicator, could be sustainability-linked bonds, where if you reach your indicator that you have set, your concessional money gets into exactly at that time and reduces the cost. So instead of being a blended, it's a blended in the right moment, where you use smartly the resources that are scarce. Also, debt swaps. Debt swaps take into advantage problems and make it a good. We have debts in a moment where interest rates are high, in a moment where risks are high, and you use this discount to swap it with guarantees that comes from multilateral development banks, with DFIs, so that you get the difference, and this difference goes into the priorities you want. We just had a deal, the largest deal ever, with Ecuador for the Galapagos, where the country saved $1 billion swapping their old debt for the new debt. And of course, the magic was our guarantees, our assistance, and the political insurance that came from DFIs. The difference was $1 billion that was split between part to pay lower debt in the future, debt service, but the part of it was for nature. Now we can have debt for nature, debt for climate, debt for social. And finally, last but not least, disasters. Disasters are coming very frequent, and we need to be resilient. We need to absorb these shocks. In the region, Latin America and the Caribbean, we have been facing quite a bit of shocks coming from climate change. So we need to have clauses in our instruments that give relief when the disaster comes, either through the private sector, in the so-called CAT bonds, with the catastrophe bonds, or in our own loans, where we give a postponement of payments, like we already had. We had 3 cases already, Bahamas, Barbados, Honduras, where the clause was initiated. But the World Bank also have announced this year that they're going the same way. So, sustainability link, debt swaps, disaster clauses, they're all a package to try to mobilize, to move from the billions to the trillions. And the only way to do it is partner with you, because the sum of the parts are smaller than us together. So this is my call for working together, and the call for action that, Michael, you mentioned at the beginning.
Many thanks, Ilan, for that very comprehensive overview. And I'd like to turn to you, Boitumelo, next. We've just had the BRICS summit in South Africa. You come to us from South Africa as head of the development bank there. The BRICS have expanded. There's a new regional global bloc, if you like, on the rise. Now, the Finance in Common is all about global collaboration. It's a global umbrella. What do you think FIX can offer in a fragmenting world, and how should FIX, Finance in Common, work with the BRICS group? What are some of the messages out of that South Africa BRICS meeting? Perhaps you could give us some thoughts on that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel, and great thank you to my chairman as well, who's in the audience, Professor Mark Swilling, and team DBSA as well. I think when you look at Finance in Common, and DBSA also being part of the IDFC, it is a phenomenal collaboration platform. And as a development finance institution, we have seen the benefits of being part of FIX in actually driving economic development in our respective country and region, including addressing climate change as well. I will give you an example of the benefits of the partnership that we've had within FIX. During the COVID period, we actually issued our first green bond, and that first green bond was anchored by the French Development Bank to the tune of 200 million euro. We have a collaboration with JICA, where they provide us technical capacity for us to support our sub-national government entities with water challenges. We have a relationship with KFW, where they've actually provided project preparation funds for us to actually support the region with project preparation. EIB, for instance, we have recently developed an embedded generation investment program as DBSA in terms of our climate, to address our climate agenda on the electricity self-generation side. And with that program, we have had the support of EIB in actually, providing facilities for that. So what is key for us as a development finance institution and being part of Finance in Common is actually leveraging and taking advantage of the partnerships and the collaboration within FIX. And for us, that is critical. At the heart of this is really about how we address that gap between SDGs and the climate agenda. In our view, these are not competing imperatives. These are complementary imperatives. What do I mean? It's not either or. It's how we use each to create the opportunity for another. And that is quite critical for us as a DFI. And what we have done as well, as part of that, we are now leading the working group for the African Association of Development Finance Institutions on the climate agenda, because we have had a depth of experience. We have, being accredited with JEF, being accredited with GCF as well, we have adequately used these platforms to actually mobilize funds, because funds mobilization is critical, right? And if we go and say SDGs, climate agenda are complementary, capital must also follow that. Capital must also follow that. It shouldn't be either or. Capital must, adequately support both. So for us, we see, us being part of FIX as a critical, as a very, very critical platform for us as a development finance that not only operates in South Africa, but operates in the rest of the continent as well. Now, let's touch on the BRICS element. BRICS is also very important to us as a country. We actually had a BRICS financial forum last week where we discussed the just transition, we discussed disruptive technologies, we discussed the future of work and sustainability as well. And what we're finding is that we all have similar challenges as countries, in terms of, social, economic development of our respective countries, poverty alleviation as well. But you see, with BRICS, the apex of BRICS is the formation of the new development bank. Since its inception, it has funded projects more than, value of about $32.8 billion US dollars. And 20% of that has been, in the continent as well, and most of that has also gone towards transport infrastructure. But what is key with the NDB and the discussions that we are having with the NBD and NDB's issues around risk sharing, with us and NDB to actually ensure financial flows of investments. But another critical thing that came up, which is what I want to link in with the challenge from a continent perspective, is the issue of local currency financing. So that is one of the items that was topical in that discussion. In that when we move towards local currency financing, and when the NDB's capacities increase in terms of local currency financing, then it will definitely strengthen the development of development finance institutions within the BRICS nations.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Boitumelo. I'd like to turn now to Remy Riou, who is the chair of Finance in Common and, most importantly, the person who invented the concept 4 years ago and launched it. And Remy, you've been looking at the evolution of Finance in Common over the past 4 years. What progress has been made and what results do you want to see from Cartagena?
Thank you, Michael, and good morning, everybody. It's really fantastic to see you all here in Cartagena from all over the world, especially when many friends that are here from day one and also many newcomers. So it's particularly warming when we remember where we were, 4 years ago, back in 2019. Yes, we started with, to remind you all, with a very, very simple idea, which is to gather the whole community of 530 public development banks under the same big and very inclusive tent that nobody owns, of course. That is our common place. Do the research. It's extremely important because our institutions somehow were made invisible for too long. And so we have a very strong research program, this database that is at the heart of the initiative. And now we are crunching the data with the help of our artificial intelligence, and we begin to better know what we are about and what could be our best positioning in the financial system and beyond. Of course, this is a forum to exchange as many, Ilian innovations, good practices, regional experiences from all over the world to implement SDGs and climate, Boitumelo. Yes, this is our common mandate. If we are multilateral, if we are local, if we are national, if we are international. The novelty is that since 2015 we have one and single mandate, which is SDGs. And there's a very important summit in New York at the end of the month to take stock of where we are on SDGs, what contribution this group can provide. And last but not least, of course, it's not about public banks only finance in common. It's really a movement, and I really welcome that we have so many stakeholders in this room and in a discussion these 3 days, coming from, yes, the world of CSOs. Civil society is here in this summit, very strong. They are in the governance of the initiative from the beginning, because we're not perfect, but we want to do better, and we want to have this dialogue in transforming our institutions, the way we operate, to be way more efficient. We have the private sector, we have local authorities, we have a lot of philanthropists in the room, considering leveraging our combined balance sheet capacity. So this is a movement to open and structure synapses, dialogue with all the stakeholders in the financial system, again, to align and to contribute to SDGs. So this is where we are. We started in a virtual Paris at the heart of COVID. Then we went, and I want to thank Cassa Depositi e Prestiti and IFAD especially. We went to Rome the second year, and second year is always crucial, of course, in such an initiative. Then Africa, yes, hosted by the African Development Bank, and now Cartagena, to learn, to build from the very special experience from Latin America and the Caribbean with Bancoldex, IDB, CAF, ALIDE, CDB. And a special thank for Werner Hoyer and EIB, because Europe, yes, and its public bank has been a partner of the initiative from the beginning, extremely active. And Werner, this is, I think, your last fixed meeting as the president of EIB. And I really wanted, on behalf of the whole community, to thank you very, very warmly. Please, a round. So this is our journey. This is where we are. Let's make this summit, can come to that later, but as vibrant as possible. There are about 60 meetings, side events, so that we can turn the group now as operational and helpful as possible.
Great. Thank you very much, Remy, for that overview. And I'd like to come now to Werner Hoyers, our last panel member. Werner, Europe has rediscovered, to some extent, the importance of cooperation with Latin America. We had the EU-Latin America Summit in July, and in 2 weeks in Santiago de Compostela, finance ministers from Europe and Latin America are meeting. What cooperation have we seen between the development banks in Europe and Latin America, and how do you think they could work together more effectively?
Thank you very much, Michael. Give me a second before I try to answer your question, in order to say thank you very much for the kind words that have been said, but also saying that we have gone a bloody long way with FIX. In 4 years, I have the feeling that every time we meet again, we have made a. Well, I give it a try. Does it work? Okay, this one does not seem to work. Okay, we have made quantum leaps, and now we have a record participation here, and we have a record participation not only of the leaders of our institutions, but we have the experts from all groups. EIB has never been more strongly represented at a FIX conference than this time, and we have people from all walks of life in the bank, which I sometimes don't even know, but we know that they are well known to their partners in the community, and together we can produce a considerable progress. I had the opportunity last week to see the Secretary General of the United Nations in New York the very moment he came back from Johannesburg from the BRICS meeting. And, you know, these are serious issues where we need to see or define our role in the context of geopolitical changes, which are a big challenge for the entire world. And there, I think we can and we must play a role. And Latin America and Europe is a very good example. We have probably not been doing enough as Europeans on this plate for a long time. But the EU CELAC summit in July was a major milestone, and the upcoming meeting in Santiago de Compostela is another good opportunity to strengthen these ties. We should be crazy not to exploit that, because another one. We are natural partners with shared values, history, culture. We have also strong economic and trade ties. But I think we Europeans have been also a little bit too much inward looking for too long. And now we are seeing that we need to protect our interests and pursue our objectives in a global context. And that means open your eyes, be available for partnerships, get away from donor-recipient thinking, and this is the core of what we need to discuss, I think, also here. We can bring the cooperation between public development banks, including the multilateral development banks, to a new level to promote trade and investment and build a new partnership. We sing from the same songbook already, so let's sing together. To counter climate change, we have to get much more active. I wear this logo here, not today only. I wear it constantly because as big as Europe might be, it's a lot smaller than what we have taken onto the set of objectives with the Sustainable Development Goals. And ladies and gentlemen, we are just about to miss them. If we don't accelerate and speed up, we are on the verge of missing the SDGs. And this should be a huge encouragement. Now, I don't believe, when you, for instance, look at the climate discussion, that we can solve our issues with doomsday scenarios. What we need to adopt is a can-do approach. By going into technology, by going into innovation, and by looking for the opportunities and not only the challenges. And there, I think the climate activities are particularly relevant indeed. I see my friend and Vice President Ambroise Fayol here in the bank, in the second row. He has turned the bank into the climate bank of the European Union, and within a few years he has managed to make us all Paris aligned, and we are on a good way to achieve the big objective of by 2030 having triggered investment in the climate field, sustainability field by $1 trillion. So we are in a good way, and I think it's very promising to go there. And this works only if we do it with the help of the private sector. Now, I sometimes in the meetings of the multilateral development banks, Elon, have the feeling that we are having discussions how to best redistribute public money. This is not the role of our institutions. That might be a small part of it. But the main thing is that we come with ideas, with projects, which become interest for the private sector, so we can entice them to co-finance and to be an active part of that movement. And on this way, I think together we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Werner. And we don't have a huge amount of time, but I would like to go back to each of our panellists briefly before we close this opening session. And Ilan, to turn back to you, you were talking about financial innovation, big topic, particularly in the Americas. The IDB's been very involved. You mentioned debt for nature swaps. What about carbon markets? Where do they fit into all this? And how big a tool do you think they can be?
Hello.
Can we sort the mic?
Hello. I think this works. I think we have a role for these instruments that we have been talking about, because the idea for us is to have scale and impact. Hoyer mentioned very well, we are not only in the business of using the public resources in the best way, it is also that, but it's also enticing and generating the best projects to be able, the private sector, to see where to go and how to do it. carbon markets are part of it, and we need to fill this space. We need to provide the markets there. I see it not as an innovation of instrument, but a way of us to build institutions and to build markets. Let me give you 2 examples of where I think we are walking the talk. One of them is our green transparency platform, where there was green and several greens and several shadows of green, and we need to harmonize. We need to give clarity. If you give clarity, and I have been in the private sector, clarity is very important for investment. You're willing in the private sector to take risks, but uncertainty is very difficult. And the difference between risk and uncertainty is when you don't know what you don't know. And here is where the transparency is important. And we are here where we're going to bring this transparency platform global with the help of our colleagues here, with AFD, with European Investment Bank, with our friends, also with KfW, to bring what we are doing here. And I heard Hoyer mention that from Europe they want to go outside. I have to tell you that Latin America and the Caribbean is the same. We need to get out of here, outside, and that's exactly what we're doing with the global. Let me give you another example. We are walking the talk. We found that this is the moment, both in terms of nature, in terms of the inflection point, the point of no return, but also in terms of the political will to bring a regional Amazon now to another acceleration, another pace. So we have designed an umbrella program, the Amazon Forever. This was not my name. It's also actually the Ministry of Environment of Brazil that had this name in Portuguese, Amazônia Sempre, Amazon Forever, which is just an umbrella program of several initiatives. We need to go together. We've used all these initiatives in a holistic program. But why I'm saying it here? Because in this context, we creating together with more than 19, 20 development banks, public banks in the region, the Green Coalition. And we heard it in the initial remarks, how important is the Green Coalition to do several things, to have institutionality, to map the initiatives, to look at projects. So we are now within this world of the public development banks thinking about a specific project in a specific region, the Amazon, to work together. And I invite all of you to come with us in this second project. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ilan. I hope everybody takes him up on that invitation. Now, time is very short, but I would like to turn quickly to our other panelists. Boitumelo, could you give us just very briefly a sort of a bit of the regional insight from Africa? Ilan was talking about Latin America, some of the main challenges and opportunities, and how Finance in Common might help.
From an African context, is that within the African context, there are a few things that stifle progress. It's the high sovereign indebtedness that limits public expenditure and increased social burdens. And, and there's quite a lot of more fund, diversion from other requirements. And also the geopolitical instabilities that are happening in the continent, And those are the challenges that are there. But you see, one of the things we really need to address from a continental perspective is the perception of risk of the continent. Cost of funds for the continent remain high. It is more costly to fund projects on the continent than in other regions as well. So the perception of risk has to change. And what does that mean is, as part of the fixed community, we really need to look at those changes in the financial architecture that have to take place that will address these specific, challenges for the continent. There's been a recent paper that was done by the Africa Peer Review and UNECA as well, that the role that rating agencies play in actually creating these gaps for the continent in how they actually do things and how they actually view the risk. And I think that is something that we definitely, need to look at, because the perception of risks speaks to cost of funds as well. And this is something that I think, we need to have honest and open discussions about in this platform. Because if we're gonna be closing the trillions, the gentleman mentioned the trillions in backlog in infrastructure for the continent, if we're gonna be driving SDGs, if we're gonna be driving, climate, these imperatives have to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Boitumelo. Remy, a final word from you. We're 7 years from 2030, not much time. What can people here in this room today, under the fixed umbrella, do in Cartagena to help us get there faster?
Cartagena is definitely a working summit. As you've understood, it's no longer about advocacy. We have now all the multilateral development banks, we have the World Federation of DFI, we have the IDFC, we have colleagues from the Montreal Group, from the Bern Union, from so many coalitions in this room with our stakeholders. So, this part of our work to build, again, this place is done. So now it's really about, yes, Werner is right, it's really about responsibility. We all in this room feel a sense of urgency, of alarm. We know that we are probably massively off track relating to SDGs. We will see the stock take by the end of this month, probably bad news also coming from the COP in December regarding the Paris Agreement and climate. And we know, on top of that, the financial tensions for so many countries in Africa and beyond, and also the geopolitics of it that is so challenging. So with this feeling of urgency, I think this group has to turn to action. And really, I urge all colleagues in this room to not lose a single good idea and out of goodwill to further structure the agenda. So we have already, again, a research program we have to push. We need more data, we need more transparency to do better. We have 9 coalitions running, again, mostly for, I would say, orphan issues, because this place is not about duplication. It's really to do here what we cannot do elsewhere, or disseminate what others are doing very finely, very nicely elsewhere. So new ones, probably on ocean. The question of culture and development will be discussed as well. So that's one. And really, I would like this summit to push and structure the agenda of cooperation. So I see a few issues. The first one is Paris and SDG alignment. So yes, we need to have a common methodology and framework on this for the public banks, but also for private finance. And there's a lot of things happening in our institutions on this that we have at the time to synthesize and agree on, probably, if we want to transform as it was stated, Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, that the transformation of the financial system is an end in itself for development and climate. Second, like Ilan said, make it a forum for financial innovations. Again, there's a lot in the room. They're too small. How could they become market practices for all of us? That's the point. I'm thinking about what we discussed in Paris during the new Global Financing Pact Summit last June about, contingent clauses, debt swaps. Well, all the excellent proposals made by IDB and other colleagues. And last, of course, work a lot together about cooperation. Technical assistance, capacity building, the juncture between multilateral and national public financial institutions. We can do way better here in having this seamless architecture so that we better position our institution, both on the financing side, we have to finance more, but also, very important, on the origination side, because the main probably market failure is there's not enough bankable projects, and we need capillarity. We need national institutions, public, if there's no private investment bankers in so many countries, to provide more opportunities for public, but also for the private sector to invest in these settings. So that's the ambition. We will try to capture that in a communique or something, and of course move forward in a multi-year agenda for FIX. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Remy. And just very quickly, because we're out of time, a final word from Werner, our fourth panelist. EIB is one of the biggest providers of climate finance, Werner. Where can public development banks be most effective in directing climate finance? What would be your quick piece of advice to people here on that?
Well, we have heard just from Remy again that it's important to arrive at new, innovative financing schemes. And I think we are quite good at that. If we look back, we invented the first green bond in 2007 and placed it at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. That idea was considered a totally lunatic idea. Now look at what the value of these instruments is nowadays and how these things are copied with other bonds of a similar objective. So we must see this in view of the new, the more modernized, innovative financing instruments, but we should not stop innovation thinking when it comes to the financing instruments. We must contribute to courageous innovation in general, and then if we consequently see climate, development and innovation in one context and not in three different boxes, I think we can make a big difference.
Splendid. Thank you very much for that, Werner. And that concludes our initial panel. So I'd like to thank very warmly all of our four speakers here, Ilan Goldfein, Buito Melo, Remy Riou and Werner Hoyer for their contributions. And we're going to move to a second panel in just a second. So stay at your seats because our first panel are going to leave the stage. We've got another panel coming on to continue the discussion. So thank you all very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat again. We're still waiting for the second panel with Michael Stock. Thank you very much.
So do take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Hello. Yeah, we've got fighting the sound system today. Right. Do take your seats, ladies and gentlemen, because we're still continuing with with our plenary discussion. This is the second half now. So if you could take your seats again, we're going to continue the discussion with the second panel of experts. And then we'll have the break. So the break will come a little later on. If you could sit down now, we're going to move to our second panel. We have with us Luis Antonio Ramirez, the president of ALIDE and the chairman of the FDFI. We have Carolina España, the executive vice president of CAF, the Latin American Development Bank. We have with us Hong Patterson, the COO and CFO of the Green Climate Fund, and Pablo Saavedra, the vice president of the World Bank. So thank you all very much for joining us. This panel, we're going to look a bit more at how to coordinate and align lending to get the most impact on sustainability. So following on from some of the themes we had in the first group, and I'd like to start with Luis Antonio Ramirez. As president of ALIDE, the Latin American Association of Development Banks, where do you see the best opportunities for the region's development banks to contribute to sustainable financing? Luis Antonio.
Well, good morning, everyone. I think, first of all, I would like to thank and to acknowledge this initiative of Finance and Common, and to thank the hospitality of Colombia of hosting this meeting in this area of the world. It is for us gratifying to have the opportunity of getting to know and getting together after many years with the pandemics that stop us. And even further in Cartagena, that is one of the most beautiful cities of Colombia. I want to tell you that me, as a president of ALIDE, I have to represent a host continent, but also one of the regions of the world that is facing the biggest number of challenges that we have in order to make possible to have a greater penetration of credit in order to improve. So we have important challenges, but we also have huge opportunities. The first one has to do basically to be able to penetrate more in order to have a greater financial inclusion. We need to strengthen value chains. We need to generate more development. We need to invest more in infrastructure so we can reduce mobility, transportation costs. And also we have a big challenge that has to do with the regional development to take advantage of trade opportunities that we have among us. But among the challenges that I would like to list, it has to do with the financing cost. This is one of the core topics in the region because the financing cost today is complicated for development banks to be able to encourage SMEs. The cost of the interest rate has inhibited commercial banks to reach those regions of the country or regions of the countries where we do not have appetite. The interest rate today are making the commercial banks they do not want to risk more, they do not have incentives to develop projects, and evidently this will force the development banks to cover those spaces. But nevertheless, we have a great opportunity there. So in this type of summit, we could be transmitting to the different banks that we need to be more creative, more innovative, and to see how we can cooperate and use these opportunities and to generate more alliances so we can have less expenses, funding, and to share experience, technologies. And that is part of the challenges that we are facing today. Technology and access to inexpensive funding. So I would like to stop now so to listen to our colleagues. Well, thank you very much, Luis Antonio, for that regional summary.
Now to Hong Patterson. Now the Green Climate Fund was set up to take on more risk, be a catalyst in lending, provide innovative financial tools to help fight the climate crisis. Perhaps you could give me some thoughts about some of the best examples of innovative financing that you've seen in the Green Climate Fund and how you think those could be more widely applicable globally.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to be here, and it's really a welcome conversation to have, particularly in this environment. So I guess just giving a little bit of context, climate financing is still quite a young industry, and if we think about climate financing, it really started in earnest after the financial crisis, and so you're looking at, even. Not to age myself, but when I think about my colleagues, most of them didn't start their careers until after the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. And having lived through it, you really know what the impact of that is. Now, pre-crisis, their real interest rates were quite high, and everyone is in shock now of where the rates are. But the reality is that pre-crisis, it really was much higher. And so the importance of GCF, it becomes increasingly important. And particularly when you think about a lot of the DFIs, a lot of the MDBs, their banks have a responsibility, they have a role, and I think about where we sit in that role and how that ecosystem works. And so the GCF is intended to take on the risks. We are set up as a fund, as you rightfully mentioned, leveraging all of the instruments. So really everything from grants, reimbursable grants, guarantees, loans, as well as equity. And that and the intention is to manifest that risk-taking, that catalyst position in financial form, which tends to be, as we work with DFIs and public development banks, it tends to be in terms of concessionality, whether that is through seed capital, junior equity investments, concessional lending, or junior debt positions. So the example that I'll give you, since we did have DBSA on the table, or on the panel today, the latest that was just approved is a water reuse program. And it's a good example of where we used our project preparatory funding to really develop that proof of concept on whether this program could work. After the analysis, GCF actually put in about $200 million in concessional financing, concessional lending, to really help balance the cost of financing that DBSA would actually have to go through, and therefore pass it on to beneficiaries. So reducing that cost to the end beneficiaries was really important. And then thirdly is to put together grant financing in terms of technical assistance. And so it's a really good way to take a look at how GCF works across the ecosystem, from proof of concept all the way down to the end beneficiaries.
Thank you very much for that, Hong. I'd like to turn now to Carolina España, y quizás te pregunto en español si quiere.
I can ask you in Spanish now. Latin America, where the CAF is operating, they have economic policies that do diverge a lot, but CAF was able to operate. How can you have a global initiative like FIX and financing common in a global environment without too many complications, without so many fights? What lessons does CAF has to operate in a divergent world?
Nice to be back in Cartagena. I used to live here in Colombia, so I'm very happy. I think it's a very interesting question. In CAF has usually been able to, since it's a borrower-oriented institution, MTB, it basically has a it's been very close to the local governments, to the governments of each of the member countries, which facilitates, I think, the dialogue. So the dialogue has always maintained politics apart, and so this has been very easy to be able to help governments in what they need. Basically, not imposing them an agenda, but helping them in what is their priorities to alleviate poverty and to promote economic growth. In that regard, that has been the case since the bank was created, since it was a 5-member country institution. Nowadays we have 20 member countries, and we have many different countries. We have small economies, big economies. We have different types of, I would say, types of running the economy. And we have small countries like in the Caribbean. Right now we're expanding our shareholders, our shareholder base to the Caribbean. And those are a different group of countries with different necessities, and we are basically listening to them and helping them with their biggest challenges. For example, we are promoting the Bridgetown Initiative in Barbados for the financing and the creation of the Blue Green Bank, which will help all the Caribbean nations with, hurricanes, all the climate events that the Caribbean usually have. So that's the way we can have different conversations, because we are very close to them. They're our shareholders, and then we do have a relationship which is carried out in a cooperative way. So, and I guess that's the secret: being close to your shareholders, having an open dialogue with them, and helping them, with their priorities and achieving, the growth, economic growth that they need to have in order to have prosperity for their people.
Thank you very much, Carolina. And Pablo Saavedra from the World Bank, I'd like to come to you now. I know you have a global practice, and it includes equitable growth. Growth's a key part, of course, of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the fight against climate change. The pandemic hit to growth set us back years. What can FIX do to help the growth part of the equation?
Thank you, and let me start by thanking our hosts here in Cartagena, Banco Dex, and the organizers for this excellent event. I think let me pick it up in one of the comments that was made by Ilan in the earlier panel, the large needs for financing, because I think that's a good way to start focusing our attention on what is needed. According to some estimations that we did at the World Bank, the world, basically developing and emerging economies in the world, need around $2.4 trillion a year of extra, additional spending, additional to what we are doing already across emerging and emerging economies, to help on 3 issues only: climate, vulnerability, and to offset some of the losses of the pandemic. So just 3. This is a massive amount of resources, and that tells me 3 things we need to do in order to achieve a growth path that enables both development and of course, takes action on climate and the other challenges that we are facing. And the first thing is that basically we need a number of different resources. We will need more resources that come from domestic revenue mobilization. We will need the resources that the private sector is ready to invest domestically and foreign direct investment. We will need, of course, the multilateral development banks. But critically, we also will need the national development banks. They play a key role in this equation. Now, it also tells me that we won't be able to do it on our own. The number is so big that no institution can do it on its own. At the same time, we need to be able to be very efficient. We won't be able to waste any resources given the size of the challenge. That means that we will need to coordinate much more. And I think FIX, it's a perfect forum to do that. Just by looking at who's present, the representation here, I think we have the balance sheet and the power here to create something that can help on the challenge. But we need to be coordinated. We cannot duplicate efforts. And the third thing that I think we will need to do is to innovate. We have a number of innovations that have been taking place across places. We have to cross-fertilize, and we need to build on that, on those innovations. We, at the World Bank, we have been working on a new toolkit for dealing with natural disasters. As an example, with catastrophic deferred drawdown options for policy lending, the interest clauses to stop paying debt at the time of disasters. We have bonds that are linked to sustainability performance in projects, and a number of co-financing agreements that we have been establishing. Today, we are also working with some groups here in the Caribbean, for example, on regional credit guarantees to support SMEs that have a key role in terms of sustainability as well. But there are a number of other innovations and a number of other challenges that we have not been able to tackle yet. So I think the Financing Commons presents a good platform for us to come together with innovations, but working together to basically gain on those synergies.
Thank you very much, Pablo. If I could turn back to you, Luis Antonio. Pablo was just talking about the gap in financing, 2.4 trillion a year of extra money needed. Latin America, where is it going to get that money from? So the problem the region has is a little different to Africa. Buitamelo in the first panel was talking about how for Africa the perceived risk is very high, cost of capital is very high. Latin America is not quite in that situation. But where do you see Latin America's share of that extra 2.4 trillion coming from? And what do you think Financing Commons can do to help mobilize that money?
Well, that is a very good question. I think we are here to see if we can achieve finance for Latin America. Evidently, we do have a great alliance with the World IDB, CAF, the World Bank, with the organizations that are supporting more climate change. So we have found a lot of partnerships, and we think that we have more solidarity. Yesterday, I was able to participate in Montreal when they are looking for new ideas to see how can they support SMEs, how to have better synergy. A couple of months ago, we had a forum in Honduras, in San Pedro Sula, for a LIDE assembly. And we were talking about these challenges that we have. And we see that we need to be more proactive within the countries in order to encourage local governments to focus more the resources in the development pole projects. So we need, with a greater financial inclusion, if we can be able to have more credit object, we can make more attractive for the commercial banks so they can also grant credits. Because the issue that we have in Latin America has to do with the fact that we do not have the sufficient number of credit subjects that can provide the finance. And we also have countries with different sizes, so they do not have the capacity to be able to invest in large-scale products. So I believe that the partnerships that we can achieve today among development banks to support each other with financing, with novelty schemes so we can share risks and we can take advantage of natural resources, geographic locations, so we can lead to projects that will be more productive so we can do the projects that are required. It is not easy because the challenge is huge and because we are having elections in many of the Latin American countries, and within that turmoil, we find inflation. I insist inflation, the increase of food prices. It's another relevant challenge. I simply would like to emphasize that as Latin American countries, we are interested in for you to carry the message that we want alliances, and we are interested in discovering and contributing with in order to abstract positive experiences. We are doing this in Mexico. We are working with SMEs in financial terms so they can help us where the commercial banks do not reach, and through that non-banking financial institutions we can tackle and we can reach these areas of the countries that are difficult to reach. Thank you very much, Luis Antonio.
Turn to you now and ask about the problem of how we define green finance and the problems with the term greenwashing. Of course, green finance is still very new. Ilan was talking about the work the IDB did earlier to try to define different types of finance, to separate out more clearly what really is green or isn't. There's obviously a lot of concerns about greenwashing, which could give climate finance a bad name. What's your view on how to tackle this problem?
Thank you. So I wasn't expecting that question, but
I like to ask surprising questions sometimes.
So I guess it is a really difficult topic to tackle because there's a real balance here. There is and the Green Climate Fund, the GCF, really faces this on a daily basis, where we have developed standards, reporting standards on an ex-post basis that oftentimes our partners really struggle with really understanding how to fill this in, how to really report back. And then on the flip side of it is a real demand to make sure that what was intended hasn't been maladapted and there wasn't unintended consequences. But there is a real balance here, and so for us, the way we've approached it is really, and it's been a recent evolution. We actually moved our Office of Sustainability and Inclusion away from our risk management team and into its own team. And the intention there is really to understand that it's not about risk mitigation, but it really is about how do you actually create a more holistic programming, a more fruitful programming where impact is even greater. And that comes in form of indigenous people's knowledge, gender assessments that are developed, and we developed our own indigenous people's advisory group just recently last year during COVID. And we're actually developing a program right now that is specifically to work in the Amazon using indigenous people's knowledge. And so hopefully we'll get that approved soon enough. But there is a real balance here. But you've got to start from the genesis of how do you actually create the program? How do you actually look at it? How do you include the people who need to be included to really understand and develop a more wholesome project? Aside from that, private sector, I have to say, private sector is, typical. Like I spent 20 plus years at JP Morgan. I know this. The fastest way downstream is a straight line, right? And that's how private sector will take profit taking. And how do you then find that convergence between public sector development and the intention of what public sector is trying to do, the impact, and marry that against the priorities of the private sector, which is to take profit. So there is, I think that there is a lot more to do there in terms of coming together as a community to develop common standards. But in terms of the programming, you do have to take it in stages and really understand that that tension of wanting to understand the real impact on the ground versus the pressure that puts on the local executing entities to really be able to track all of that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was a brilliant answer. It sounded to me like you were expecting the question. Carolina, just a very simple one for you. We don't have a lot of time left. I mean, from a CAF perspective, what's the result you would most like to see from this Cartagena meeting of FIX?
I think the result that we would like to see is increased cooperation and increased coordination among, our other peers, and also other public development banks, but all stakeholders. So I think that's really important. I think something that Mr. Ru mentioned at the beginning, capacity building, it's key. I think it's key, and also having bankable projects. I think we have this problem, and I think if we are able to build a pipeline of projects regionally for countries, with a concerted, with a consensus of the local authorities, I think that would make a lot of difference. Would really be something that would attract also not only public development banks but also private sector. So I think that's something that it's going to be very very impactful, and also I think that we need to articulate more our actions in order to be able to build innovative solutions, as some of the previous speakers said, to be able to make this happen and hopefully have a very better coordination and a better implementation of projects.
Thank you. And Pablo, a final word from you. The IDB and World Bank leaders recently agreed a 4-year partnership to work more closely together to improve their impact in Latin America. That sounds like a model that is very much sort of in the spirit of FIX. What do you think FIX can learn from that kind of model, and could it be used in other parts of the world?
Yes, the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank just signed a memorandum of understanding last week, and it covers very specific issues. I think what is very interesting, there are many MOUs across the world among organizations. I think what is very interesting of this MOU are a couple of things. One, that it's very specific about the issues that will be tackled. And rather than make it about absolutely everything, it's very focused, and it tackles very specific items that both organizations want to work together. I think that's one. It's very focused. The second is that on the issues that is focused, let's think about the Amazon. It brings a very comprehensive approach to deal with the situation. So we all want to protect the Amazon. We want to do an effort so there's no deforestation. At the same time, you have to provide jobs, livelihoods to the people that live there. So if you don't tackle the economic jobs aspects of it, then it's very hard to deal with the overarching issue. So in that sense, it goes deep in few issues, but each issue is tackled comprehensively. I think that's one important aspect of that agreement that was signed with IDB. I think overall in FIX, we need to think about taking advantage of the large balance sheet that is available. In the earlier session, Javier mentioned that the combined balance sheet here is massive. And so maybe we can find ways to work around specific products, specific issues, where several players, several participants of FIX can come together. And I think it has to be specific enough so we can have an impact, and it has to tackle a problem in all the aspects that the problem presents. So I think that those are some of the lessons of that agreement.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pablo, for that. And with that, I would say we're concluding now this session. I'm afraid we're out of time. I wish we could go on talking for a lot longer, because these are great topics and we've had some fantastic speakers. I think, to summarize it in just a few words, we're talking innovation, we're talking collaboration, and we're talking action. So I suppose those are the sort of watchwords, aren't they? And I think our speakers have set the scene brilliantly for these days of discussion in Cartagena. I hope you all find it useful, and I hope you all find it very productive. But I'd like you all to give a big thank you to our speakers here on the panel for all their contributions. Thank you. And we're now going to hear from our next speaker.
So, please just one last word. I'm Adam Amarico, Secretary General of the Finance in Common movement, and I just want to thank you all to be here and few important messages. I will be very brief because I know that you are very eager to go to work. So, dear friends, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to see you all today in Cartagena. The 4th edition of Finance in Common is now officially launched, as you have seen, and I would like to thank this morning's distinguished speakers and panelists for this insightful introduction. There is a saying in Africa, "Lo bok bul xaar ñu la ci wo." Some of you may not know what it means. It means if you are part of something, don't wait to be called for it. If you are part of something, don't wait to be called for it. And today you are here because you feel to be part of this agenda. 1,000 people have registered this morning and are in this building to discuss with these issues in Cartagena for the people and for the planet. That makes me proud as Secretary General, but mostly that makes proud all the people, all the team that have put work on this to make it happen. So I would just like to thank them and to applaud them. The team that have worked to put this better condition possible for you, now it's for you to work. And it's for you to deliver for what matters, deliver for SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, Rémi, you said it earlier, this is a working summit. The program is both dense and diverse, reflecting the multiple challenges of today's world, especially in emerging and developing economies, but also the numerous opportunities that arise from innovation, diversity, and inclusiveness. We need active and productive engagement with the audience. This is what will enrich the debate and help to deliver and contribute to the emergence of global framework for sustainable investment. Our objective, our organizers and co-hosts, is to benefit from each and every session, either by sharing knowledge or by issuing action plans and solutions from some challenges to be raised today. Please help us with that. The FIX movement is all about collaboration. It's all about inclusiveness. I would like to thank all our session organizers, leads and co-leads who have designed and organized these various sessions and side meetings. Your role was crucial in building the program and making this summit a success. So the off program is as good as the official program. So I look forward to these discussions to come. Finally, as delegates, you will also have the opportunity to better understand and better apprehend the importance of sport, arts, culture in delivering on the SDGs. through a combination of side events and performance that will take place during the 3 days. For those who were in Rome 2 years ago, in 2021, you may have heard me saying that we all come from somewhere. We are somewhere, and we are all going somewhere. In fact, 4 years ago, we planted a seed bearing the hope for a better planet, with the intuition that public development banks could have a role to play in its blooming. As some of you may recall, Finance in Common was initially born as a summit gathering regional networks and their public development banks members around the same conviction. More needs to be done for the climate, the biodiversity, the sustainable agenda. 4 years down the road, thanks to the dedication and the mobilization of all of you, our movement has become a tree, still young, but vigorous, ready to continue the journey and build new alliances for the next generation of development financing. Obviously, we need to work harder, to deliver better, to take bold steps towards financing the 2030 agenda. It's in 75 months. So bear it in mind. Now more than ever, it's crucial to find collective answers and maintain the space for stronger collaboration. This has been the ambition of Finance in Common, and I'm confident that this year's summit will be another important milestone. Fix 2023 is a working summit. So we all know that person that is very smart enough to ask you, so what are the concrete deliverables of your summit? So why a new summit again? Why we sit and talk? Of course, and it's right, we have to remind also ourselves that sometimes people talk to send institutional love letters to each other and obviously for themselves. Not this time, please. But my friends, let's talk clearly. I'm not going to stop talking. I'm absolutely sorry for nothing, especially not for talking about SDGs, how they are important, and we should dedicate time, conviction, and resources towards transforming the financial system. Yes, we will talk about climate, biodiversity, financial inclusion, and sustainable infrastructures. Yes, we will talk about human rights and mobilization of foreign capital. Yes, we will sit and talk, because the day we stop talking is the day we stop standing for what matters for the people and the planet. It's the day we start being useless. And it's the day we don't talk anymore, it's the day we become uncollaborative. But that's not us, because we are not just bankers. We are public development bankers, guided by the general interest and the hope of a world in common. So please talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk even to your enemies. Keep talking. Talk to people you know and people you don't know. I want to thank all the partners from private sector, regulation system, and norm setters, the researchers, academics, think tanks, and the civil society organization, to whom I want also to deliver a special thank for the joint declaration and recommendation they have shared with the FIX community. Yes, my friend, we talk about what matters, not just us, but also for the other stakeholders. I hope you will all come back home with new ideas, new contacts, new commitments, which will only strengthen your daily dedication to build innovative and impactful projects. I need you to come back home, remembering one simple but crucial understanding. Finance in Common is about doing better and more for the people and the planet. So enjoy your summit, enjoy the networking opportunities, enjoy Cartagena, and now let's go to work. Thank you.
Al secretario general Marico y a todos nuestros invitados.
To the General Secretary Marico, we want to thank you for your contribution. Now you are invited to have a 15-minute break to be here at 10:50 You will be able to participate in 3 simultaneous sessions. Panel 1, Colombia for the World, the New Vision of Public Banking and Development Banking. Roundtable 1, the role of public banking in support of the SMEs towards sustainability and solutions, financial and non-financial solutions. Roundtable 2, support in a fair type of resiliencies, opportunities for partnership. Panel 3, to promote global change, the role of public development banks in mobilization of private capital for sustainable infrastructure. After these parallel sessions, you will enjoy lunch, typical join in the claustro of Animas at 12. At 1:30 p.m., we meet again here in this room in Gethsemane for Plenary 2, Latin America and the Caribbean, 2030-2050 vision, with the main speaker, the writer Hector Abad Faciolince. After the second plenary and after these plenary sessions at 6:30, you are welcome to the welcome cocktail offered by FIX 2023. We will enjoy some artistic dancing by the Colombian group Sancoma, with the presentation When Arts Meet Challenges for Development. Thank you again. 10:50, we start this parallel event. Thank you. 1:30, again, we meet you here at this same room, Gethsemane. Thank you.